And we'll start with you, Tim. Good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'll be fairly brief. My name's Tim Berne. I'm the business manager for Local 51 Plumbers and Pipefitters. We represent about 1,200 plumbers, pipefitters, and refrigeration service technicians for the state of Rhode Island. The legislation that's put before you, we oppose it fundamentally for the way it's written. We don't feel that an expansion of the siding board is required. I've dealt with siding boards in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire, and many of those boards will work with subcommittees to solve different problems. Rhode Island's not quite as big. And although the issues are complex, which is why we have the people there that are there, we don't feel that adding anybody to it is going to help solve any of the complexity of those problems that come before them. One of the other items we had was the makeup of the additional committee. It added an additional environmental person with environmental knowledge, along with the director of the environmental management. And I was interested listening to Senator Connolly questioning the same reasoning, because it just doesn't make sense to duplicate the efforts when they have a full staff at their disposal. One of the items on there was a person of labor. And my question to the House version of this bill was, what is a person of labor? Is it a person who works? Is it a laborer? Is it a labor leader? Is it a labor lawyer? And in any of those capacities, what expertise would they have in order to cite one of these? Certainly building it, but citing it. So we were confused with that. And then we got into the tax treaty itself, and you know, that's a real brief one for me, because you've questioned the use of the town council in this situation, which really was a question that we had. You know, why is this body being asked to decide something that the council really should be deciding? And certainly, if there's no faith in the councilors, like Senator Nesselbush said, then, you know, replace them. I mean, that happens all the time. But one question I had as I was sitting here was, according to the tax treaty, there's most tax treaties have time frames, and if it has to go in front of the town for approval, would each tax treaty have to go in front of the town for approval? In other words, if we have a tax treaty that has a length of 15 years, at the end of that 15-year period, after whatever facility is up and running, and the tax treaty gets renegotiated, does it have to go back for the town approval? And if that's the case, thinking along the line of business, how good is that for our state opening up the door for business that says, you know, you're going to have to renegotiate your treaty and come in front of the people for approval of that committee, of that treaty periodically? So we had a lot of questions on it. We certainly don't like this bill the way it's written. We oppose it the way it's written. And real quickly, just to say, like, moving it someplace else, Mike was right. The infrastructure's up there. Many other facilities we have around the state, like in Johnston, that doesn't come off a transmission line. That's a distribution line that comes into a compressor station that's located on site. The Tiverton peaking station, that comes from a distribution line that comes from a high-pressure Algonquin line located in Massachusetts. And the infrastructure for electrical is there. Does it have to be upgraded or changed? Probably so, to handle the increased load. But the siting for those lines are already there. The infrastructure is in place for it, as far as the dedication of that land and right-of-ways. So these things are why we have a siting committee. These things are planned out very carefully. So we would certainly hope you would not accept this legislation, certainly how it's written, and that's our position on it. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? Senator Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Berne. I think you make an important point. It's one of my concerns when I look at the language of the statute on the approval process. Under current language, I don't think there's any question that when the present tax treaty expires, that any subsequent treaties would need to be approved by a majority of the voters. So that's a concern, because we all know how the energy, well, you understand how the energy market works, and the tax treaties are critical to the investment in the plants that create the energy based on the length and the stability of the tax treaty. The other concern is that, or the other concern, but I guess another insight that I would suggest is that the tax treaties and energy plants are not really to be looked at the way sort of economic development tax treaties looked at. It's a different animal altogether. I would suggest that the host community actually has the leverage in a tax treaty because the plant that's seeking to locate there needs that tax treaty for the investment and the way the market works. And you have a kind of a captive customer, so that not only do you have, from at least my perspective, not only does the community have additional leverage in a tax treaty that's based upon the location of an energy plant, it has probably even more leverage when you get around to renewal time. I think it would be unfortunate to see communities lose that leverage through this process. One last thought on that while you're talking about the tax treaties and the impact of the renewals is that, because there has been some talk about transparency and accountability, the tax treaty still has to go to a public hearing. No matter what difficulties you may think you're having right now in feeling left out of the negotiation process, the tax treaty can't be approved without going back to the town council and being subject to a public hearing already. That's already a requirement in Rhode Island law. So the transparency and the accountability is there. It's not maybe there in the negotiation process. You're not sitting at the negotiating table, but I'm sure you're going to be there in full force when it comes time for the town council to vote on that tax treaty and explain the details of that tax treaty to you. So I just think it's important that we don't lose sight of the fact that the council, whether you like the treaty or not, can't engage in a secret tax treaty. It has to go through that public hearing process.